Today, we're going to talk about a truly one of a kind voice in music history. A voice that I guarantee you've heard probably more times than you even realize, but a story you might not know. This is the story of Donna Jean Godchaux. And we have to start on a somber note. It was recently confirmed that the music world lost this incredible talent. Donna Jean Godchaux McKay passed away at the age of 78 after a battle with cancer. And her music, as you're about to see, really did touch generations. Now, for millions of people, this is who she was. The soulful mezzo-soprano who spent the entire 1970s touring and recording with the Grateful Dead. And get this, she was the only woman to ever be an official member of that legendary, sprawling rock and roll family. But here's where the story gets really interesting. What if that famous role wasn't actually her most important one? What if I told you that long before she ever set foot on stage with Jerry Garcia, her voice was already woven into the fabric of popular music, hiding in plain sight on records we all know and love? Okay, so to really get her full story, we have to go back, way back before the whole San Francisco psychedelic scene. Her journey actually starts in the legendary recording studios of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, pretty much the hit-making capital of the South. See, she was what's called a session singer, and these folks are really the unsung heroes of the music business. They're the pros who are brought in to lay down those perfect backing vocals, the harmonies that take a song from good to absolutely unforgettable, all without usually getting their name on the album cover. And just look at this list. I mean, look at the sheer star power she was working with. Before she was even 20 years old, she was lending her voice to some of the biggest names in the game. You've got Elvis, Cher, Neil Diamond, icons from completely different worlds, and they were all coming to Muscle Shoals for that sound she helped create. And we're not talking about deep album cuts here. No, we're talking about some of the most iconic songs ever made. That's her voice you hear adding that incredible depth to Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman. And yep, that's her on Elvis Presley's massive hit Suspicious Minds. Just incredible. She said the sessions with Elvis were very intense, super professional. But right after, that professionalism just went out the window. She told this amazing story about how she and the other singers got a Polaroid with the king. And then, in her own words, we went into the International House of Pancakes in Memphis and screamed bloody murder for about an hour, holding up that little Polaroid picture of us and Elvis together. I mean, can you blame them? What a moment. So fast forward to 1970, and her life just takes this wild turn. She leaves the South, moves to San Francisco, and meets a pianist named Keith Godchaux, who would become her husband. And that's when she ran into a band that was operating on a completely different planet. The story is just fantastic. After seeing the Dead play, she literally walked right up to Jerry Garcia and told him, "You guys need my husband Keith in this band." She somehow got Jerry's home phone number, and before you know it, both she and Keith were official members. A whole new chapter for the band began in 1971. And you have to imagine the culture shock she went through. I mean, this slide just lays it all out. As a session singer, everything is controlled, precise, professional. You wear headphones. The Grateful Dead stage, it was the exact opposite. Loud, chaotic, totally improvisational, and fueled by a very different kind of energy. And you gotta love her honesty about it. She admitted later in life that, yeah, sometimes her vocals were a little pitchy on those live tapes. She said, with a laugh, "Everything was so loud on stage, and not to mention being inebriated. I can't defend myself very much, but I can't blame it all on that." It's just such a real,
candid look at what it was like performing in that environment. But hey, despite all those challenges, her voice became such a key part of the Dead sound during their biggest run in the 70s. She's all over some of their most iconic albums, from the legendary live record Europe 72 to studio classics like Terrapin Station and Shakedown Street. But by 1979, that life on the road,
it takes its toll. Citing just pure exhaustion, both she and Keith left the Grateful Dead. It was really the end of an era, but it was also the start of a brand new and often really difficult personal journey for her. This next chapter was just filled with incredible highs and devastating lows. Just 1 year after they left the band, Keith was tragically killed in a car accident. But Donna, she kept going. She remarried, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and eventually, she got back to making music completely on her own terms. And this quote from an interview she gave, man, it just perfectly captures her spirit. She was open about having regrets, like we all do, but she was all about moving forward. She said, "If you keep looking back, you got nothing. If you look ahead to what is there before you, then life is good." So, when we look back and think about Donna Jean Godchaux, we have to see the whole picture, right? Her legacy is really twofold. On one hand, she's the celebrated vocalist for one of the biggest cult bands in the world. And on the other, she's the anonymous, essential voice behind some of the greatest hits of all time. And in 1994, she got that official recognition she so deserved. Her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame right alongside her Grateful Dead bandmates. It was the perfect honor, really cementing her unique place in the history of rock and roll. But her story kind of leaves us with this bigger question, doesn't it? It's a powerful reminder that behind every great song we love, there are these layers and layers of talent. Her journey from the shadows of the studio to the bright lights of the stage and back again really makes you wonder, how many other hidden voices are out there, shaping the soundtrack of our lives without us ever even knowing their names?
You know, the world of music has lost one of its most distinctive voices and truly gifted songwriters. John Lodge, the iconic bassist for the Moody Blues, has passed away at the age of 82. So today, let's take a moment to remember his incredible journey and the amazing legacy he's left behind for all of us.
In a really moving statement, his family shared that John Lodge passed away suddenly and, well, unexpectedly. They painted this picture of a really peaceful end, surrounded by the people he loved, listening to the sounds of the Everly Brothers and Buddy Holly, the music that started it all for him. It's just such a poignant final note for a life that was truly lived in melody.
So to really get the full picture of John Lodge's impact, we've got to go back to the moment he became this absolutely pivotal force in one of rock's most innovative bands. Now, the Moody Blues actually formed in 1964, but the band that we all know and love today, that story really kicks off in 1966. That's when Birmingham's own John Lodge and singer Justin Hayward joined the group. And let me tell you, this wasn't just some simple lineup change. It was a total game changer. It was the beginning of the band's classic, most influential era. With Lodge on board, everything changed. The band set out on a whole new musical journey. He became one of the key architects of their groundbreaking sound, that incredible fusion of orchestral rock and psychedelia that would go on to define a generation.
And all of that led to their 1967 masterpiece, Days of Future Past. Now, this wasn't just a collection of songs. No, this is considered one of rock's first ever concept albums, a record that tells one big unified story from beginning to end. By weaving rock music together with a full orchestra, they created a sound that nobody had ever heard before. And Lodge's melodic bass, that was the glue that held the whole thing together. And they didn't just stop there, not by a long shot. Their follow-up album, In Search of the Lost Chord, went even deeper into those psychedelic themes. And this is where Lodge's songwriting really started to shine, contributing to an album that just kept pushing the boundaries of what a rock band could be.
And, as the band evolved, so did Lodge's contributions. About a decade later, on albums like Octave, the band adopted a more polished, radio-friendly sound. It just goes to show you their incredible versatility and Lodge's knack for crafting these unforgettable melodies that could totally adapt to the changing taste in music.
And this wasn't just some flash in the pan. I mean, we're talking about a career with the Moody Blues that spanned over 5 incredible decades. Think about that for a second. 5 decades. It's a true testament to his talent and the timeless appeal of their music. Their longevity was just mind-blowing. The band's final studio album was a collection of Christmas songs called December, and that came out way back in 2003. But get this, that was nowhere near the end. For another 15 years, they kept touring, sharing their music with devoted fans all over the world, all the way up until 2018.
And that year, 2018, was absolutely monumental. Not only did it mark the band's final live shows after more than 50 years on the road, but it was also the year they were finally, and so rightfully, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. What a fitting capstone to an absolutely incredible career. But to really appreciate the artist, it really helps to know the man behind the music. Lodge's personal life and his faith were the bedrock that supported him through a long, storied career in what can be a pretty wild industry. Lodge was, first and foremost, a devoted family man. He married his wife, Kirsten, way back in 1968, and their love story lasted his entire life. He was a father to 2 children, Emily and Christian. He was also a man of deep faith, an evangelical Christian, and he often said that his faith was what kept him grounded through all the pressures and temptations of the rock and roll world. And you can really see that beautiful intersection of his family and his art in Emily's song. It's this incredibly touching tribute he wrote for his daughter, and it appeared on the 1971 album Every Good Boy Deserves Favor. It's such a personal, heartfelt piece that just shows you how deeply his family life was woven right into his music. So, when you step back and look at it all, what is the lasting legacy of John Lodge? It's so much more than just hit records or sold-out tours. It's about this deep, almost spiritual connection that he built with his audience, a connection he acknowledged at the end of every single show. His family shared his signature sign-off in their statement, a phrase he used at the end of every show. It just perfectly sums up his gratitude, his own beliefs, and that unwavering bond he had with his fans. As John would always say, thank you for keeping the faith. His music will absolutely live on, and his place in the pantheon of rock and roll will never, ever be forgotten.
Today, we need to talk about a sudden silence on the airwaves in Philadelphia. It's a silence that really marks the end of an era. We're going to be talking about the life and legacy of a true broadcast legend, Pierre Robert.
Okay, so first things first. Let's just go over the essential confirmed facts as this story has been breaking.
So here's the news that's just so tough to report. The legendary Pierre Robert, a true fixture of Philadelphia radio on 93.3 WMMR, has passed away. He was discovered in his home on Wednesday.
He was 70 years old, an age that I think for so many of his listeners just feels way too soon for a voice that honestly felt timeless.
Now, what authorities have said is that no foul play is suspected, but an official cause of death hasn't been released to the public just yet.
But you know, the story of Pierre Robert, it isn't really about his passing. It's about his incredible life and a career that went on for more than 4 decades, really defining the sound of rock for generations of people in Philadelphia. His whole journey with WMMR started way back in 1981. And for over 40 years, he wasn't just on the radio, he was the radio for so many people. He became the city's beloved midday host, and his impact was officially cemented back in 2019 when he was inducted into the Philadelphia Music Alliance Walk of Fame. You just can't talk about the history of rock music in Philadelphia without talking about Pierre Robert. He didn't just play the songs, he was a core part of the city's cultural fabric. He was that voice connecting the artists to the people.
And think about this. He created these daily rituals that just became a part of his listeners' lives. Whether it was the noontime workforce blocks getting you through your workday, or his vinyl cut segments, or his unbelievable interviews and history lessons, he was just this consistent, comforting, and exciting presence every single day.
And of course, you gotta talk about his famous opening. That warm, welcoming greetings, citizens. That wasn't just some catchphrase, It was an invitation. It made you feel like you were part of this big community, this huge club of music lovers with Pierre as your guide. But his impact, it went so far beyond the broadcast booth. He took his platform, that connection he had with the city, and used it for something much, much bigger.
People who knew him and worked with him, they're all quick to point out that his generosity was just a defining part of who he was. He totally understood the power of his voice and his platform, and he used it tirelessly to support causes he believed in, right there in his own community. And look, this wasn't just him reading a PSA and moving on. He was deeply personally involved. From hosting and supporting the AIDS Walk to championing Mana's Pie in the Sky fundraiser on the air, he was just an active and genuine force for good in Philly. His colleagues at WMMR, Preston Elliott and Steve Morrison, they shared their thoughts, and they really paint a picture of a guy whose on-air personality was 100% authentic. Preston said he'd never met a bigger music fan, and that he was just an open book about what music meant to him and how much he loved sharing it.
And Steve Morrison builds on that, emphasizing his genuine nature. He said, despite being this huge local celebrity, he was just a regular guy who legitimately cared about people. He wasn't just a legend in Philadelphia, he was seen as one of the true, legendary rock DJs in the entire country. So, as you can imagine, this loss has been felt at every single level, and it's prompted tributes that really cement his status not just as a great radio host, but as a true icon of the city.
Yeah, in an official statement, the CEO of Beasley Media Group, Caroline Beasley, she captured it perfectly. She highlighted his unwavering love for music and his deep connection with listeners as the absolute keys to why his legacy will endure.
And that's the thing, right? This connection wasn't just coming through your car radio. He was always there, a constant presence at concerts, from the smallest clubs to the biggest stadiums. He didn't hide backstage. He was out there with the fans, greeting them, as the station said, like they were his personal friends.
His passing just leaves this profound silence. And it leaves us all with a question to think about. In this modern age of automated playlists and faceless algorithms, what's the real value of a single, trusted, passionate human voice? What does a figure like Pierre Robert actually mean to the identity and soul of a city? Well, his legacy suggests the answer is everything.
We've got some very serious and somber news coming out of the rock and roll world today. It concerns the legendary Kiss guitarist Ace Frehley, who is reportedly in critical condition. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down the facts as we know them right now in this developing story. This is the headline from TMZ that just stopped everyone in their tracks on Thursday, October 16th. It sent absolute shockwaves through the music community. It's a truly grave situation, and it's what we're going to be focusing on today. So, what happened? Well, according to that same TMZ report, this entire medical crisis stems from a brain bleed, and that reportedly was the result of a fall Ace Frehley had in his studio a couple of weeks before this news came out. Okay, so you have to be asking, how did we get to this critical point? To really understand what's happening, we need to back up a little because this whole story started with what seemed like a pretty minor incident. Let's just walk through this timeline together, because you can see how fast things started to escalate. It all begins in late September, a minor fall. Then, on the 25th, a show gets canceled, but the official word reassures everyone saying he is fine. But then, just a short time later on October 7th, everything changes. All of his remaining tour dates for 2025 are canceled. And then boom, October 16th, we get the news that he's in critical condition. You know, when that tour cancellation happened, the official reason given out was simply ongoing medical issues. And at the time, sure, that was concerning for fans. But looking back now, with what we know, that very vague statement just carries so much more weight. It's chilling, really. And that brings us right up to the present day. And I have to warn you, the details being reported about his current condition are incredibly grim. I mean, just look at the contrast here. It really shows you how dramatically the story has shifted. We went from hearing things like minor fall and getting official assurances that he is fine, to now hearing about a brain bleed, that he's on a ventilator, and that the prognosis is, well, not good. It's just a deeply, deeply worrying turn of events. So let's just lay out the key details from the report, because they are incredibly serious. First, that Ace is currently on a ventilator. Second, and this is the most difficult detail of all, is that his family is reportedly considering turning off life support. And third, all of this is being linked back to that initial fall in his studio. And just for context, this legendary rock icon is 74 years old. So why has this news hit the rock community so hard? I mean, beyond the obvious human tragedy of it all, to understand that, you really have to look at the immense influence of Ace Frehley. He's known to millions as the Spaceman. And Ace Frehley wasn't just in Kiss, he was a founding member, the original lead guitarist. He was a key architect of that sound that, let's be honest, absolutely changed rock and roll forever. His guitar work literally defined a generation. And as you would expect for someone of his stature, the second this news broke, the rock world just lit up. Peers, journalists, and fans immediately started sharing messages of concern and tribute all over social media. Here's one from well-known music journalist Mitch LaFon, who shared a sentiment that a lot of people are feeling. Ace, thank you for the music and memories, God bless. It's simple, but it's powerful, and it really captures the feeling out there. And this right here, this shows you the sheer breadth of his influence. Maynard James Keenan, the singer of Tool, I mean, we're talking about a completely different era, a different subgenre of rock. He posted a simple 2-word tribute. Godspeed, Ace. That really tells you everything you need to know about the kind of impact this man had. Now, as we start to wrap up, it is absolutely vital to remember that as of this recording, this is very much a developing story. The situation is still fluid, and information is still coming in. And it's so important to be clear about this. All of these details are coming from that journalistic report from TMZ. As of right now, there's been no official statement from Ace Frehley's family or his management team to confirm anything. So, as the entire music world is basically holding its breath and hoping for the best, this news is a heavy moment to just stop and reflect on the legacy of the Spaceman. His riffs, from Detroit Rock City to New York Groove, they're not just songs, they're woven into the very fabric of rock music. We'll, of course, continue to follow this story. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everyone, today we're covering some really tough news from the world of sports media. We're going to focus on the confirmed details of a life that was just cut way too short and the powerful tributes that have been pouring in.
So on Monday, the digital media giant Barstool Sports had to make a pretty devastating announcement about one of their own. It sent a real shockwave through their entire community and really the whole golf world. They announced the passing of Cody Franke, who most of us knew as Beef, at the tragically young age of just 31 years old.
The official statements from Barstool and from his colleagues said the cause was a sudden medical issue. At the time, a more specific cause of death wasn't made public.
So, let's just walk through the confirmed details around this really sudden event, just so we can understand the circumstances as they were reported.
Okay, so here's what we know for sure. The person is Cody Beef Franke from Barstool Sports. He passed away over the weekend, and his colleagues confirmed he was in the Dominican Republic at the time, actually attending a friend's wedding.
And this was the raw, on-air reaction from his colleague, Dan Big Cat Katz. You can just feel the weight of it all in his words. Just absolute devastation. There's not much more you can say. Now, to really get the impact of this loss, you kind of have to understand who Cody Franke was and the unique space he made for himself. So let's take a look at his journey. He actually started out as a traditional PGA professional, even became the head pro at Berry Creek Country Club, but then he took that expertise and built this huge social media following by making golf tips that people could actually use. That success is what led him to Barstool's 4-play golf team just this year, back in January.
This one simple phrase, that was his entire brand. You know how golf can sometimes feel so complicated and kind of exclusive? Well, his whole mission was to make it less intimidating, more fun for just the average person. And that's exactly why people connected with him.
But, the real story of who Cody was is probably best told by the people who worked right alongside him. Let's look at how his colleagues and friends are remembering him.
This was the big theme in pretty much every single tribute, starting with this really powerful statement from his own team at the 4-Play podcast. Think about that. Not just a nice guy, but universally known as the nicest. That says so much. And his team's tribute went even deeper, painting this picture of a guy who was driven by two huge passions. On one hand, he had this genuine love for the game of golf. But on the other, he had this even bigger love for sharing that joy with other people. It wasn't just about his own score. It was about seeing other people find happiness in the game. And that feeling came right from the top. The founder of Barstool, Dave Portnoy, he echoed the exact same thing, calling him the nicest, most genuine person. When you see that kind of consistency across the board, it really tells you everything you need to know about someone's character.
And, in the middle of all this grief, his boss, Dave Portnoy, he shared a bigger, more universal message that really came out of this loss.
It really forces you to ask a tough question. When you're faced with a loss that is this sudden, this unexpected, what's the lesson here? What are you supposed to take away from it?
Dave Portnoy put it very bluntly. He basically said this tragedy is just a cruel, sobering reminder of how fragile life is, that nothing is ever guaranteed. And the only thing we can really do is value the time that we have.
Our thoughts are with his family, his friends, and all his colleagues. Thanks so much for watching.
Today, we're breaking down the confirmed facts surrounding the tragic passing of social media star Amon Atienza.
This is a story about a public life and a private struggle, based entirely on official reports.
On October 24th, news reports confirmed that Emmanuel, or Amon Atienza, had tragically passed away. And she was so young, just 19 years old when she died at her home in Los Angeles.
The LA County Medical Examiner's Office officially confirmed the cause of death was suicide.
So to really get the impact here, it's important to know who she was.
Well, Emin was a huge Filipino influencer and the daughter of well-known Filipino media personalities. Her reach was massive. We're talking hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok and Instagram combined.
But it wasn't just about the numbers. Her real power came from her authenticity.
The months leading up to her death were tough, including a move to LA after intense online backlash. Ultimately, the confirmation came from those closest to her, her family, in an Instagram tribute.
Their post began with this just heartbreaking announcement, confirming the loss for all her followers.
They spoke about the incredible joy and laughter she brought, not just to them, but to everyone.
They pointed to this special gift she had, making people feel genuinely seen and heard.
And that was the key, right? Her honesty about her struggles made so many others feel less alone.
Their tribute then shifted, ending with a final message about how Emin should be remembered.
It was a direct request to honor her memory by living out these same qualities.
Which leaves us with the question, how do we turn online grief into real-world kindness?
You know, there are stars, there are icons, and then there was Diane Keaton. Today, we're taking a moment to celebrate the incredible life and career of a true original. An artist who wasn't just in a league of her own, she basically created the league.
Tributes have been pouring in, and this one from Julia Garner, it really just nails it. Unapologetically herself. That's the key, isn't it? It was never just about the acting. It was her whole vibe, that wit, that warmth, that unbelievable style. A total original.
So, let's dive into this and really see how that unique voice was forged right from the very beginning. Okay, so picture this. A young Diane Hall moves to New York to become an actress, but she hits this little snag. Turns out, there's already another Diane Hall in the Actors Union. So what does she do? She just casually takes her mom's maiden name, Keaton. A simple fix that, wow, ended up becoming one of the most iconic names in Hollywood. Her path to stardom was anything but conventional. I mean, it was marked by this super rapid rise that just showcased her one-of-a-kind talent from the get-go. Just check out this timeline. We're talking about a 4-year jump from being a Broadway understudy to landing a key role in The Godfather. That's not just a rapid rise, that's a rocket launch. And the story behind her casting in The Godfather is just fantastic. She actually auditioned without even reading the book. She just went for it, and she later said that landing that role was the kindest thing that someone's ever done for me. I mean, talk about a life-changing moment. So after that breakthrough, Keaton just went on to create this series of roles that didn't just define her career, they really defined an entire era of filmmaking.
As Kay Adams Corleone, she was this incredible calm in middle of the storm, right? The moral compass in this world of violence and betrayal. And think about it. She stood toe-to-toe with Brando and Pacino and completely, totally held her own. That's true screen presence.
And then there was Annie Hall. This was the game changer. The character was basically Diane Keaton playing a version of herself, right down to the clothes she wore. It was this amazing blur between fiction and reality. And it's what earned her that incredibly well-deserved Oscar. And we have to talk about her comedic genius. I mean, The First Wives Club, it's an absolute masterpiece. That final scene where she, Goldie Hawn, and Bette Midler just belt out, "You don't own me," it is pure, unadulterated joy. It's impossible to watch that and not have a huge smile on your face. And while she had so many incredible roles, it was Annie Hall that got her the Oscar. It was a performance that didn't just win an award, it completely captured a moment in time and cemented her status as a true legend. But her influence, it went so far beyond the screen. With that one film, she kinda accidentally started a fashion revolution that would go on to define a generation. Get this, the iconic look from Annie Hall wasn't a costume designed by a wardrobe department, it was just Diane. She wore her own clothes, and that menswear-inspired style sparked this global fashion phenomenon. It all came down to a few key pieces, right? The hat, the tie, the vest, the trousers. She took these traditionally masculine items and just made them her own. Quirky, smart, and completely cool. It was so much more than just fashion. It was a statement.
And that independence, that was the defining feature of her life off-screen as well. She really forged a path that was entirely 100% her own.
This quote, it just says it all. From a really young age, she knew she wanted a different kind of life. She was so determined to live on her own terms, and that was a decision she stuck with for her entire life.
She absolutely marched to the beat of her own drum. She never married, had these legendary romances with some of Hollywood's biggest leading men, and then, in her 50s, she decided to become a mom, all on her own terms. That is a life lived with zero apologies.
And she often said that becoming a mother was the most profound experience of her life. It grounded her, it completely reshaped her perspective. She described it as this incredibly humbling journey. So when we look back, her legacy is just so much richer and more complex than a simple list of film credits. It's about a life that was fully, beautifully lived.
She was so much more than an actress. She was a director, an author, a photographer, but honestly, some of her biggest roles were off-screen, as a devoted caregiver to her family.
Singular icon. That's just the perfect way to describe her. You can't copy Diane Keaton. That perfect mix of wit and awkwardness and intelligence, that was all her. A true one of one.
So how do you honor a legacy like that? In a world that loves to put people in boxes, Diane Keaton was just this joyful explosion of individuality. I think the best way to remember her is to be a little more you. Be unapologetically, brilliantly yourself.
We're going to talk about a truly one-of-a-kind voice in music history. A voice that I guarantee you've heard probably more times than you even realize, but a story you might not know. This is the story of Donna Jean Godchaux. And we have to start on a somber note. It was recently confirmed that the music world lost this incredible talent. Donna Jean Godchaux McKay passed away at the age of 78 after a battle with cancer. And her music, as you're about to see, really did touch generations. Now, for millions of people, this is who she was. The soulful mezzo-soprano who spent the entire 1970s touring and recording with the Grateful Dead. And get this, she was the only woman to ever be an official member of that legendary, sprawling rock and roll family. But here's where the story gets really interesting. What if that famous role wasn't actually her most important one? What if I told you that long before she ever set foot on stage with Jerry Garcia, her voice was already woven into the fabric of popular music, hiding in plain sight on records we all know and love? Okay, so to really get her full story, we have to go back, way back before the whole San Francisco psychedelic scene. Her journey actually starts in the legendary recording studios of Muscle Shoals, Alabama, pretty much the hit-making capital of the South. See, she was what's called a session singer, and these folks are really the unsung heroes of the music business. They're the pros who are brought in to lay down those perfect backing vocals, the harmonies that take a song from good to absolutely unforgettable, all without usually getting their name on the album cover. And just look at this list. I mean, look at the sheer star power she was working with. Before she was even 20 years old, she was lending her voice to some of the biggest names in the game. You've got Elvis, Cher, Neil Diamond, icons from completely different worlds, and they were all coming to Muscle Shoals for that sound she helped create. And we're not talking about deep album cuts here. No, we're talking about some of the most iconic songs ever made. That's her voice you hear adding that incredible depth to Percy Sledge's When a Man Loves a Woman. And yup, that's her on Elvis Presley's massive hit Suspicious Minds. Just incredible. She said the sessions with Elvis were very intense, super professional. But right after, that professionalism just went out the window. She told this amazing story about how she and the other singers got a Polaroid with the king. And then, in her own words, we went into the International House of Pancakes in Memphis and screamed bloody murder for about an hour, holding up that little Polaroid picture of us and Elvis together. I mean, can you blame them? What a moment. So fast forward to 1970, and her life just takes this wild turn. She leaves the South, moves to San Francisco, and meets a pianist named Keith Godchaux, who would become her husband. And that's when she ran into a band that was operating on a completely different planet. The story is just fantastic. After seeing the Dead play, she literally walked right up to Jerry Garcia and told him, "You guys need my husband Keith in this band." She somehow got Jerry's home phone number, and before you know it, both she and Keith were official members. A whole new chapter for the band began in 1971. And you have to imagine the culture shock she went through. I mean, this slide just lays it all out. As a session singer, everything is controlled, precise, professional. You wear headphones. The Grateful Dead stage, it was the exact opposite. Loud, chaotic, totally improvisational, and fueled by a very different kind of energy. And you gotta love her honesty about it. She admitted later in life that, yeah, sometimes her vocals were a little pitchy on those live tapes. She said, with a laugh, everything was so loud on stage, and not to mention being inebriated. I can't defend myself very much, but I can't blame it all on that. It's just such a real,
candid look at what it was like performing in that environment. But hey, despite all those challenges, her voice became such a key part of the Dead sound during their biggest run in the 70s. She's all over some of their most iconic albums, from the legendary live record Europe 72 to studio classics like Terrapin Station and Shakedown Street. But by 1979, that life on the road,
it takes its toll. Citing just pure exhaustion, both she and Keith left the Grateful Dead. It was really the end of an era. But it was also the start of a brand new and often really difficult personal journey for her. This next chapter was just filled with incredible highs and devastating lows. Just 1 year after they left the band, Keith was tragically killed in a car accident. But Donna, she kept going. She remarried, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and eventually, she got back to making music completely on her own terms. And this quote from an interview she gave, man, it just perfectly captures her spirit. She was open about having regrets, like we all do, but she was all about moving forward. She said, if you keep looking back, you got nothing. If you look ahead to what is there before you, then life is good. So when we look back and think about Donna Jean Godchaux, we have